It was past midnight. The hospital café was almost empty. No laughter, no conversations, only the low hum of the coffee machine and the distant sound of a monitor beeping somewhere in the building. At a corner table, a billionaire sat alone, not surrounded by assistants, not on a business call, just a man staring at a cup of untouched coffee. And across the room, a young nurse was crying, silently, carefully, as if she had learned that in this place, even tears must not make noise. The billionaire noticed her. He stood up, walked toward the counter, bought one more coffee, not knowing that this simple act would lead him to a name etched forever on a hospital wall. His name was Ethan Cole. To the world, he was a legend, founder of a global tech empire, net worth in billions, named among the most powerful men alive. But tonight, none of that mattered. Ethan was just another visitor in the hospital. His younger brother, Daniel, had been fighting a rare illness for months. Money bought the best doctors. Money bought the best machines. But money couldn't buy certainty, and that terrified him. Ethan hadn't slept in 2 days. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He came to the cafe not for coffee, but to escape the silence of the waiting room. That's when he saw her. She was still in uniform, blue scrubs, hair tied back hastily, hands trembling as she tried to wipe her tears. She wasn't sobbing, she wasn't dramatic. She cried the way exhausted people cry, like their body had finally given up. Ethan looked away at first. He wasn't a man who interfered. He solved problems with contracts, not conversations. But something about her broke through his walls. Maybe it was the way she kept apologizing to no one, whispering, "I tried, I really tried." Maybe it was because for the first time, he realized someone here was hurting just as much as he was. He stood up. Ethan walked to the counter. "One more coffee," he said quietly. "Medium, no sugar." The cashier nodded. When he turned back, the nurse looked up, startled. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said quickly, standing up. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "You weren't," Ethan replied. He placed the coffee on her table. "This helps sometimes, or at least it gives your hands something to hold." She hesitated. "I can't accept." "It's just coffee," he interrupted gently, "not charity." She sat back down. "Thank you," she whispered. Their eyes met for a second. In that moment, he didn't see a nurse. He saw a human being who had reached her limit. They didn't exchange names. They didn't ask personal questions. The cafe's clock ticked loudly above them. "I lost a patient tonight," she said suddenly. "A little boy, 7 years old." Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry again. "I promised his mother he'd be okay," she continued. "I shouldn't have promised." Ethan swallowed. "My brother's upstairs, ICU." She nodded slowly. "Then you know," she said. "Here we learn that promises are dangerous." There was a pause. Then she gave a tired smile. "But we still make them." Ethan had signed deals worth billions. He had negotiated with ruthless investors, outplayed competitors, controlled rooms full of powerful people. But he had never felt this small, this powerless. Sitting across from someone who fought life and death every day without applause, without headlines. "You should go home," he said. "You look exhausted." She shook her head. "My shift ends in an hour," she replied, "and then I'll come back tomorrow." "Why?" Ethan asked before he could stop himself. She looked at the coffee cup, then up at him. "Because if I don't," she said softly, "someone else might not make it." The cafe lights flickered. A janitor began stacking chairs. The night was moving forward, whether they were ready or not. Ethan stood up. "I hope your next shift is kinder," he said. She smiled, a real smile this time. "And I hope your brother comes home," she replied. They walked in opposite directions. No phone numbers, no promises. Just two strangers sharing a moment the world would never notice. Or so Ethan thought. The next morning, Ethan returned to the hospital early. As he walked past the main corridor, his eyes drifted to a large wall near the entrance. A memorial wall. Names engraved in polished stone. Doctors, volunteers, and nurses, honored for extraordinary service. Ethan stopped walking. One name caught his breath. A name he had heard only once. The nurse from the café. The woman who cried into her coffee. Her name was carved permanently on the hospital wall. And suddenly, Ethan realized he had no idea who she truly was. Ethan stood frozen for a long moment, staring at the letters engraved in granite. Amara Singh. The name seemed impossibly small, yet impossibly significant. It didn't come with headlines or ticker symbols. There were no boardrooms, no shareholders' applause, just quiet service, sacrifice, and, he realized, a courage he had never truly measured before. He traced the letters with a fingertip, almost unconsciously. He thought about the night before, the exhausted nurse, the whispered confessions, the coffee he'd handed her. She had seemed fragile, broken even, but now her name was etched in permanence. He imagined her standing there, a little boy's tiny hand slipping from her grasp, yet still showing up the next day, again and again, against exhaustion, grief, fear. Ethan turned away from the wall and walked down the corridor, but the image lingered. Everywhere he looked, he saw hints of her presence, the efficiency of the nurses, the quiet dignity in the way the doctors spoke to patients, the calm authority with which someone managed chaos. He had always seen hospitals as places of medicine, of science, of precise calculations, but now he saw something else, human endurance in its rawest form. When he reached the ICU entrance, a nurse caught his eye and smiled softly. She seemed familiar, but he couldn't place her. Then he remembered. She had been in the cafe. Amara. He had never known her last name. Now he did. He entered his brother Daniel's room. Machines beeped in soft symphonies. The lights dimmed for the night shift. Daniel lay still, his chest rising and falling steadily. Ethan pulled a chair close and sat down. He didn't speak. He just watched. After the night he had endured, after the helplessness he had felt, there was a strange comfort in simply being near him. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and something else. Life, tenuous but present. When Daniel stirred slightly and opened his eyes, "Ethan?" His voice was weak, hoarse from hours of tubes and oxygen. "You stayed?" "Always," Ethan replied. He took his brother's hand, noting the small movements of recognition. "You're doing better." Daniel's lips curved in a faint, exhausted smile. "Better because of you?" Ethan shook his head. "Because of the people around you. Me? I just bought coffee." Daniel chuckled faintly, though it sounded more like a breath than a laugh. "Coffee saves lives now?" "Sometimes," Ethan said softly. "Sometimes it's enough." The room fell silent again, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of machines. Ethan leaned back in his chair, and for the first time in days, he let himself feel the weight of the last month. The tension, the fear, the helplessness, it all pulled into a single realization. Control was an illusion. Money, influence, fame, they couldn't guarantee life. They couldn't guarantee love. They couldn't guarantee survival. Later that morning, Ethan found himself walking the hospital corridors again, compelled by a force he couldn't name. The place was waking up. The night staff handed over reports to the day shift. Families shuffled into rooms, weary-eyed, clutching small plastic cups of lukewarm coffee. Somewhere, a child cried, muffled by the thin walls of a pediatric ward. He wandered aimlessly until he came upon the nurses' station. There, amid the chatter of shift changes, he spotted her, Amara. She moved with practiced precision, checking charts, adjusting IV lines, speaking softly to patients. Nothing had changed in her demeanor, except perhaps a subtle deepening in her eyes, a quiet resilience that seemed to radiate outward. He approached cautiously. She looked up. Recognition flashed in her eyes, but it was brief, almost imperceptible. "Mr. Cole." "Ethan," he corrected gently. "Please call me Ethan." Her lips pressed together briefly, as if she wanted to say more but decided against it. I heard about your brother. I hope he's doing better." "He is, thanks." Amara glanced down at her clipboard, as if that shielded her from conversation she didn't want. Ethan noticed the faint bruises on her wrists, the tired lines etched into her face, and something in him shifted. He had dealt with crises, yes, but never on this scale, not day after day, night after night, balancing grief and hope in a hospital wing. Ethan hesitated. "I wanted to thank you." Amara finally looked at him fully. Her eyes softened, but there was no dramatic flourish. "For what?" she asked. "For what you do, for staying when it's hard, for caring when most people walk away." Amara shook her head slightly. "You don't have to thank me, that's my job. And besides," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "somebody has to be here. Somebody has to try." Ethan was struck by her humility. He had built empires, struck deals worth billions, controlled rooms full of people who feared him, and yet in this moment he felt small again, not because of lack of power, but because of the magnitude of human commitment he had witnessed. They stood in silence, the hum of the hospital a steady backdrop. He wanted to say more, offer help, offer advice, offer something to make her life easier, but he realized words would fall short. What she needed wasn't words. She didn't need money. She didn't need influence. She needed recognition, respect, and the rare acknowledgement that someone outside her world saw the weight she carried. "I saw your name," he said finally, almost as if confessing. "Amara Singh." Her shoulders tensed. "You saw?" "I did. And He stopped. How do you tell someone that their courage humbles you, that watching them do their job makes your accomplishments feel small, that even a billionaire can feel powerless in front of simple human endurance? She looked at him with something like guarded curiosity. "It doesn't matter," she said softly. "No, it does," Ethan replied firmly. "It matters to me." Amara studied him a long moment. Then she nodded slightly. "Thank you, Ethan." It wasn't dramatic, no tears, no flourish, just acknowledgement. Ethan left the nurse's station, walking slowly back to his brother's room. He felt a strange lightness, not relief, he couldn't let himself feel that, but a kind of clarity. He realized that life was stitched together not by wealth or power, but by these small, unnoticed acts of courage, staying up all night, holding a child's hand, giving someone coffee in a quiet cafe when the world feels unbearably heavy. When he returned to Daniel's side, he noticed his brother stirring again. "Ethan." "I'm here," he said. Daniel's eyes focused on him for a long moment. "She's amazing," he whispered. "Who?" "The nurse, Amara," Daniel said, smiling faintly. "The one who saved me in ways you can't. The one who stayed when she didn't have to." Ethan swallowed hard. He realized that while he had thought he was coming to save his brother, in many ways it was Amara who had done the saving, through knowledge, patience, dedication, and quiet human courage. He sat back, silently vowing that he would never forget her. Not the coffee, not the tears, not the tired smile she had given him that night, but the enormity of the life she had dedicated to others. And in that moment, he understood something profoundly simple. The world didn't always notice heroes like Amara Singh, but he would. Ethan finally left the ICU to return home, but a part of him lingered in that hospital cafe, in the quiet heroism of a nurse who cried in silence, who risked exhaustion and heartbreak every day, and who did it all without the world ever noticing. The days that followed were a blur for Ethan. He returned to his company, sat in boardrooms, signed contracts worth millions, yet his mind lingered in the quiet corridors of the hospital. Every decision, every negotiation felt suddenly smaller. The real weight of life wasn't measured in profits. It was measured in the countless small acts of courage he had witnessed, especially the one woman who had left a mark far deeper than any deal ever could. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Amara. Not just the coffee, not just the tear-streaked face, but the unwavering commitment, the way she carried grief and hope together like a silent shield. It gnawed at him that he had walked away from her with nothing more than a passing acknowledgement. He wanted to do something, not charity, not applause, but something meaningful, something that truly honored the work she had devoted her life to. He returned to the hospital one morning, but this time with purpose. The receptionist recognized him immediately. "Mr. Cole," she said politely, "are you here to see your brother?" Ethan shook his head. "Not today. I'm here for someone else." The receptionist blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't," Ethan admitted. "I just need to speak with the hospital director." Within an hour, he found himself in the director's office. The man behind the desk was polite, cautious. "Mr. Cole, how can I help you?" Ethan leaned forward. "I want to support this hospital, not in a flashy way, not to put my name on a building or a plaque. I want to support the people who keep it running, the ones who save lives every day without anyone noticing." The director's eyebrows rose. "That's unusual. Most donors want visibility." "I'm not most donors," Ethan said. "There's a nurse here, Amara Singh. She's on your memorial wall, but that's not enough. I want to create a program that ensures nurses like her get the resources, rest, and recognition they deserve. Proper shifts, mental health support, small grants for continuing education, whatever it takes. I just want to make sure she and her colleagues aren't left to burn out in silence." The director studied him for a long moment. "That would make a real difference." Ethan nodded. "Then let's do it. I don't need my name attached. Just make sure it reaches the right people." By the next week, Ethan had quietly funded a comprehensive wellness and support program for the hospital staff. He didn't announce it. There were no press releases, no media coverage, just emails sent internally, posters discreetly placed in break rooms, and a subtle improvement in resources for the nurses and junior doctors. He returned to the hospital one evening, walking past the main corridor like any other visitor. The night staff was settling in, patients' families sitting in waiting areas, the faint smell of antiseptic in the air. He spotted Amara again, moving between beds with her usual quiet efficiency. He approached cautiously. "Amara," he said softly. She looked up, startled. Recognition flashed in her eyes. "Mr. Cole?" she said politely, but careful. "Ethan," he corrected, smiling faintly. "I wanted to see you again." Her lips pressed together, an instinctive shield against strangers, even familiar ones. I heard about your brother," she said. "I hope he's recovering well." "He is," Ethan said. "Thanks to you, in part." Her eyes flickered. "Me?" "Yes," he said simply. "Your dedication, your patience, you make a difference every day, and I wanted to make sure you and your colleagues have support to keep doing it." Amara blinked. "Support?" "I started a program," Ethan said. "Wellness, mental health, grants for continuing education, proper shift coverage, things that actually help you, not just plaques or recognition. I want to make sure no one here has to carry the weight alone." For a moment, her face betrayed disbelief, as if such attention was unfamiliar. Then her expression softened. Why do this?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "Because the world notices money, not effort. I've realized I need to notice the effort. People like you save lives in ways no one writes stories about. I can't fix everything, but I can fix a little. And you deserve that." Amara's eyes shimmered, though she didn't cry. She simply nodded. "Thank you," she said steadily, "for seeing us." "Seeing you," Ethan corrected gently. The hospital lights hummed softly. Machines beeped in rhythm with life. Around them, the world carried on, unaware, but for a few moments, Ethan realized recognition mattered more than applause. A simple acknowledgement, a meaningful resource, could ripple through lives far more than headlines ever could. Over the following weeks, Ethan visited quietly, observing the program's effects. Break rooms became less crowded. Nurses had scheduled rotations for rest. Small grants allowed some to attend workshops they'd never dreamed possible. He noticed Amara smiling more confident, lighter even in exhaustion. One evening, as the night shift was ending, Ethan found her alone in the cafe. She was sitting at the same corner table, quietly sipping tea. He approached, careful not to startle her. "You made a difference," he said softly. She looked up, faintly surprised. "You're here again?" "I wanted to see," Ethan said. "Not just the program, but you. How are you?" Amara set her cup down. "I'm managing. The work never stops. But," she paused, glanced around the empty cafe. "The support helps. It really does." Ethan nodded. "I'm glad." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled, a real unguarded smile. "You're not like anyone else I've met here. Usually people see the building, the patients, the headlines, but you actually see the people." "That's the least I could do," Ethan said, though inwardly he knew it wasn't enough to repay the lessons she had taught him. They sat in silence for a while, watching the coffee steam curl into the air. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the windows, but inside the hospital cafe, the world felt quieter, more intimate, suspended between lives saved and lives yet to be lived. Eventually, Amara stood, stretching her arms. "I should get back," she said. "There are patients who need me." "I know," Ethan said, "and that's why I'm glad you have a little support now, not just for you, but for everyone who relies on you." She nodded. "Thank you, Ethan, really." They didn't exchange numbers, they didn't make promises, but the moment was profound, weighted with understanding and mutual respect. Ethan left the cafe, walking through the hospital corridors with a lightness he hadn't felt in months. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, but inside him, something had shifted. Power, influence, and wealth had never felt so small. Real impact wasn't measured in billions, it was measured in acknowledgement, in resources, in ensuring that people like Amara could continue to save lives without breaking themselves in the process. Weeks later, as he returned to his office, a thought struck him. He could continue to fund programs, quietly support hospitals, advocate for healthcare workers, but the lessons of the hospital stayed with him. Seeing Amara's courage reminded him that heroism didn't need applause, and that compassion, quietly practiced, could ripple farther than any headline ever could. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan understood. He had come to the hospital to save his brother, but in truth, he had been the one changed. Weeks turned into months, and the hospital began to feel different, even to its staff. The small but deliberate changes Ethan had quietly funded had taken root. Break rooms were brighter, stocked with snacks and supplies. Night shifts no longer meant endless stretches with no relief. Rotations were fair, and mental health support was finally available. Nurses who had been silently teetering on exhaustion were beginning to smile again. Small victories, quiet ones, but victories nonetheless. Amara Singh noticed it first. She walked into the break room one evening and found a new lounge area with comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and even a small library of medical journals and personal development books. She ran her fingers along the spine of a book she had wanted to read for months and realized for the first time in years she didn't feel guilty for taking a moment for herself. Later, while checking charts, she noticed her colleagues looking more alert, more engaged, less harried than before. Conversations flowed, laughter returned in small doses, and for the first time, the hum of the hospital didn't feel oppressive. Life and work were still challenging, yes, but there was breathing room now. Amara thought of Ethan, the man who had walked into the cafe that night, offered her a simple cup of coffee and left without expectation, had set something in motion that neither of them fully understood at the time. He had given her recognition when no one else had, and more importantly, he had provided resources to make their daily struggles sustainable. One evening, as she left her shift, she paused near the memorial wall. Her name glinted in the polished stone, a quiet acknowledgement of her years of service and courage. She had never sought recognition, yet seeing it still struck something deep within her. She ran a hand over the smooth granite and whispered, "I'm just doing my job." And yet, she realized, doing one's job with heart, with dedication, with empathy, that was extraordinary. That mattered. more than she had ever realized. Ethan, meanwhile, had changed too. Back in his world of glass towers and high-powered meetings, he carried the lessons of the hospital with him. He approached business with a new perspective, asking questions about the human impact of every decision. Employees noticed the shift. It wasn't about profit alone anymore, it was about purpose. His empire had grown powerful, but now he measured success differently, not in dollars, but in impact. He returned to the hospital often, quietly observing, listening, learning. He would walk past the nurses' station, exchange a few words with Amara or her colleagues, sometimes bringing supplies, sometimes just offering a nod of acknowledgement. No one outside the hospital knew he was doing it. He didn't need praise. He only needed the knowledge that the work he had helped support was making a tangible difference. One night, he found himself in the cafe again, sitting across from Amara as she rested between shifts. The room was quiet, the machines in the distance humming their familiar rhythm. "You've changed a lot," Amara said, half smiling, "since that night in the cafe. I think you've changed me more than I've changed the hospital. I realized I can't just throw money at problems. Real change, real courage comes from the people on the front lines, people like you." Amara looked down at her hands, then up again. "You've given us tools, yes, but we still do the work. We still face loss. We still cry. Sometimes it doesn't feel enough." Ethan nodded. "It's never enough, but it matters. Every small act matters, and it multiplies when people get the support to keep going." She nodded slowly, understanding settling in. "Then we do it. We keep going." "Exactly," he said, "and others should too. That's why I want to do more, not just here, but everywhere. Hospitals, schools, shelters, any place where people work tirelessly to care for others but get little recognition." Amara's eyes widened. "You mean you want to scale this, make it bigger?" "I want to inspire others," Ethan said. "Not just donate, but create systems, programs, awareness, so that people who give everything get something back, even if it's small. Rest, resources, recognition. That's how we honor real courage." Amara thought of her colleagues, the countless nurses who had worked double shifts, who had saved lives quietly, who had carried grief in silence. She realized she wasn't the only one who needed acknowledgement. No one was. "You're right," she said finally. "If this works here, it can work anywhere." Ethan smiled. "It can, and it should." The cafe was silent for a moment, but the air felt alive with possibility. They didn't need applause, they didn't need headlines, they just needed action, and they were ready to act. As Ethan left the hospital that night, he made a silent promise to himself. He would take this further. The world was full of Amaras, people giving everything they had with no one noticing, and if he could help even a fraction of them survive, thrive, and feel seen, it would be worth more than any contract, any stock, any fortune. Back at the corporate office, he drafted plans, contacted hospitals, met with educators and social workers, and quietly built a network of support for frontline heroes everywhere. The focus was simple: resources, rest, recognition, and respect. A system designed not to make donors look good, but to make lives better. Months later, the first reports came back. Hospitals reported fewer burnout incidents, nurses took scheduled breaks, mental health sessions were attended without stigma. Simple grants allowed staff to attend workshops, conferences, and seminars they had only dreamed about. Change was slow, but it was tangible, and it was spreading. Ethan realized the lesson he had learned in that quiet hospital cafe extended far beyond the building walls. Power wasn't just about control. Influence wasn't just about decisions in boardrooms. True impact came from noticing the unnoticed, from supporting the unsupported, from giving strength to those who had none left to give. Amara, too, felt the shift. She worked harder, yes, but now she knew she wasn't alone. Her efforts were acknowledged, supported, and amplified. She smiled more freely. She laughed occasionally. She held patients' hands, knowing that while she still faced loss, she had allies she could rely on. One evening, after another long shift, Amara returned to the memorial wall. She traced the names with her fingers and whispered, "To all of you who keep going, even when no one sees, we see each other now." And in that quiet, unassuming acknowledgement, the seed of a larger movement had been planted, a movement where courage and compassion were recognized, supported, and celebrated. Ethan knew it wasn't the end. There would always be more hospitals, more people, more lives in need.
But he also knew something else, that one cup of coffee, one act of recognition, one decision to act quietly and thoughtfully could ripple farther than any headline ever could. Now, the call isn't just for Ethan or for Amara, it's for all of us. Look around you. Who is giving everything, quietly, without applause? Who is caring for others, sacrificing their own comfort, their own health, their own sleep without anyone noticing? They are everywhere, in hospitals, in schools, in shelters, in our communities. You don't need a billion-dollar empire to help. You don't need fame. You don't need recognition. You need attention, empathy, and action. Support the caregivers, provide resources, listen, acknowledge, advocate. Even small acts like checking in, offering support, donating resources, sharing knowledge can change lives. The world is full of unsung heroes, and every time we notice, support, and uplift them, we make the world a little more humane. Courage deserves more than silence. Dedication deserves more than anonymity. Compassion deserves recognition. Start today. Look around. Find your Amara and do something that matters, something that lasts. Because real impact doesn't need headlines. Real impact needs action.